This is Your Anxiety Toolkit, episode number 146. Welcome to Your Anxiety Toolkit. I'm your host, Kimberly Quinlan. This podcast is fueled by three main goals. The first goal is to provide you with some extra tools to help you manage your anxiety. Second goal, to inspire you. Anxiety doesn't get to decide how you live your life. And number three, and I leave the best for last, is to provide you with one big, fat virtual hug. Because experiencing anxiety ain't easy. If that sounds good to you, let's go. Well, welcome back. I'm happy you're here. You know what? I'm grateful you're here. I'm hoping that your heart is, okay. I hope it's getting through. I hope it's coping. I hope it's finding a few moments here and there, or many, of some peace and comfort and support. And if it hasn't, well, I hope this short podcast will be the thing that gives it to you, right? Provides that for you. Okay, so before we get started, I wanted to let you guys know that I have not got an I Did a Hard Thing segment for this week. And the reason for that is I forgot. I forgot. And that's totally okay because it fits so beautifully with the topic I want to talk to you guys about today, which is a self-compassion tool that I think everyone will benefit from. So here's sort of a scenario. So, I'm talking about self-compassion a lot. I speak about it a lot with my patients and clients. And probably one of the most common things I hear back is, well, I don't really deserve self-compassion, or it just feels fake to be self-compassionate, or it just doesn't feel right. It doesn't feel right to give myself kindness and tenderness and warmth. Now, I could go into a whole long spiel about how culture impacts that and how our societal norms kind of take us away from taking care of ourselves and encourage us not to be compassionate to ourselves. And that's for another podcast. I could go on and on and on about how, unfortunately, our society has taught us to believe that it's weak or fake or narcissistic to be kind to ourselves. It's just such baloney. Anyway, I wanted to really talk with you about a tool you might want to try if, in fact, you're struggling with feeling worthy or deserving or comfortable with self-compassion. So let's sort of do a scenario. Let's imagine that you're having a moment of fear. Some of you may not need to imagine it. Maybe you're feeling it right now, okay? Given that this is called Your Anxiety Toolkit, I'm going to assume you've had fear recently. Okay, so we're going to go to a moment where you felt fear. And in that moment, you naturally will engage in a safety behavior. Maybe you avoid fear. You avoid the thing that makes you feel fear. Maybe you get into aggression and you really move towards fear and you wrestle it out with aggression and anger and fighting and blaming and all those things. Maybe you just freeze and all you can do to cope with your anxiety is to sleep. Now, none of these make you bad. These are called safety behaviors because naturally you do them to protect yourself from pain. You're not flawed. We're not flawed human beings. We are highly effective human beings. We have learned how to go away from danger, right? So naturally when we have fear, whether it's warranted or not, whether it's we have an actual danger or sometimes, our brain tells us there's something to be worried about when really there isn't, which is, I think, for everybody, we all experience that. But in that moment, you are doing what any human would do, which is to try and get away from it. It's called a safety behavior. It's why we have lived so long. It's why we survive and get through so many hard times. We have to somewhat be, kind of proud of that, right? And I think here is where people go wrong, is they have fear. They engage in a safety behavior. Usually with safety behaviors, unfortunately, the side effect of those or the unintended consequence of those is there's some kind of problem that comes from safety behaviors. If you avoid, let's say you have social anxiety, and so you avoid social interactions, the unintended consequence is you're lonely or you don't feel good about yourself. Let's say you have health anxiety and your safety behavior is to do a lot of Googling and checking to see whether you match the symptoms. The unintended consequence, unfortunately, is now you've read 17 things that you're freaked out about, and that you've got more things to worry about now. Let's say you are afraid of what somebody thinks about you. A lot of people right now are talking about having family conflict, right? Because of COVID-19, stress is high, lots happening, people are locked indoors, and so their safety behavior was to get into an argument, but the unintended consequence of that is now we have a severed relationship because you're afraid of, what they might think about you and so forth, right? So we have these natural safety behaviors. It's not your fault that you do these. I want to make it really, really clear that we have to sort of put our hand on our heart and say, this is what humans do. Safety behaviors aren't what flawed humans do. It's what all humans do. We all do this. And some do it a lot and some don't do it a lot. But we all engage in these every single day, right? It's not our fault. And, hopefully we're going to move now into creating some compassion for that. Okay, so you have fear. You do a safety behavior. You have an unintended consequence. And then you also judge yourself for how poorly you're handling it. And what I'd like to do is I'd like to just squeeze in there, before you start judging yourself, and for you to implement a couple of things. Number one, we don't need to judge ourselves for having feelings, right? If you're super depressed right now, and the safety behavior with that is, to sort of stay in bed and, pull your sheets up or say really mean things to yourself, that's not because you're a flawed human being. That's a safety behavior. We do that in effort to protect ourselves from more pain, right? But let's say you've done that. If you can, I'd like for you to catch yourself, squeeze in right before you judge yourself and tell yourself how terrible you are, right? And once you've got yourself in that sweet spot, if you can, this is a lot of mindfulness, right? Being able to be aware and catch what's happening for us internally. If you can catch that and you're really struggling with giving yourself compassion, here is what I'd like you to do. I'd like you to give the original trigger your compassion, the fear. Let's be compassionate to fear in and of itself. Let's be compassionate to depression that you're experiencing. Let's be kind and warm to this experience of suffering, right? And so what we're doing here is it's a stepping stone towards you treating yourself well. And sometimes if that feels too strong, you can take this first step, which is, meet your emotion and the safety behavior with compassion. Maybe you might want to recall, all humans engage in safety behaviors because all humans have felt fear and sadness and guilt and disgust and shame and all the feelings, right? This is a very human experience. And I'm going to be compassionate to the human that I am, right? So again, it's a stepping stone. Ideally, from there, we can move at being compassionate to our entire being kind and sending well wishes to all that we are in this moment. But if that doesn't work for you right now, and you want to take this little baby step in that direction, meet the emotion. Meet the emotion with recognition and validation that you're allowed to be here. Now, this brings me to a major point, which is this. Most of the time, we feel an emotion, whether it be fear, sadness, guilt, shame, like disgust. I listed a bunch of them off. We feel them, and then we try to make them go away. Again, we do a safety behavior. The problem and another unintended consequence of that behavior is we usually make that feeling bigger when we avoid it. Have you ever kind of experienced that? The more you don't want to feel fear, the stronger it gets and the scarier it feels. The more you don't want to feel shame, the more you hide it, right? The more you keep it secret, the more you feel like you're a complete outcast and so separate to the rest of the world, right? And so then you have more and more and more shame, right? So true of shame, right? Then we just go into secrecy and silence. So the more we do that, the more we feel. And what we would like to do, what I would like you to do, is if, again, you can sort of intersect at that point, and instead of trying not to feel that emotion, meet the emotion with compassion. Again, this is sort of like a trick so that you are being compassionate without feeling the vulnerability that maybe is a little too new, right? Is we meet the emotion as if the emotion is a thing that lives inside us, right? It's a part of us, but not our whole totality, right? So we notice fear and we go, okay, I'm having fear. All humans have fear. This is a normal experience. I usually would go and engage in this safety behavior, but instead, I'm actually going to meet the emotion with kindness. And you might say, wow, fear, thank you for showing up, right? Thank you for trying to protect me, right? I'm going to send you well wishes, right? Because I want to create a relationship with fear that is positive instead of aggressive and negative, right? If shame shows up, you might go, okay, I noticed shame. And instead of me going into a sort of a rumination about how bad I am and how I've done all these 17 things wrong today and how, now I'm bad because I just wasted 10 minutes ruminating and now I can't concentrate and I'm such a failure. And instead of going into that safety behavior, and if you do, that's fine. But instead of that, just go, hey, shame, I see you. You're here, you're here because you really want to push me forward into making sure I never get outcasted and making sure I never get kicked off the island. And can I meet shame with, this is the good piece, is sometimes the most compassionate thing we can do with shame and fear and guilt is to shine a light on it. Big, big thing. Okay, so I'll tell you a story. I have had a really, really difficult week. I have had to work through a couple of really big triggers for me, like 10 out of 10 triggers. And it's been an amazing process for me to really sit back and watch myself go back to old behaviors, right? Go back to, getting stuck in a shame pit and ruminating and wanting to please people and all the things, right? I could tell you a whole story about it, but I won't bore you. But ultimately, it took me 4 full days to catch that I was stuck in shame. 4 whole days. And I like to think of myself as mindful, but maybe I'm not. Maybe I've got a lot to learn, right? And I'm okay with that. But 4 full days, I caught that I was in shame. And I know how to manage shame. Brené Brown's research shows that to be shame resilient, the first thing you have to do after you catch it is share it. Tell someone you trust. So I pick up the phone, I call a very dear friend, and I say, okay, I'm going to tell you something. You don't need to comfort me. You don't need to give me advice. I just want to tell you so that I can shine a light on shame, because I don't want shame to win this one, right? And I'd like to shine a light, help somebody else see it so that they can say, yeah, me too. I feel that. I've been through that, right? And then from there, I'm going to be compassionate towards shame. I'm going to notice where shame shows up, and I'm going to meet it with kindness. And let me give you one more tip. And I actually may do a full episode on this next week, which is if you're struggling with accessing kindness, check in with yourself and ask yourself, if I were to access my imagination, what would it feel like for the most kind version of me? What voice would I have? What posture would I have? What would my eyes look like? Would they be soft or would they be sharp? Would my muscles be tense or would they be soft? Would I be speaking fast or slowly? Would I be endearing? What might I say? Right? And you might access it that way. I will do an episode on this next week. I will be sure for us to sort of work on getting, access to that, what it feels like. And maybe you guys can give me feedback too after you see this and hear this and tell me what you think, what works for you. But anyway, that's it, right? We ultimately want to be a receiver of kindness and warmth. But if that's too hard for you right now, if you don't feel worthy of that, which is not true, and we can go through that too at a later date, but if you're feeling it really difficult to be kind to yourself, be kind to the emotion. Just meet the emotion with kindness. It doesn't even have to be about you if you don't want it to be, right? Just yet. Okay, so that's that. I did a hard thing because I just didn't. And I could easily go into a guilt trip and then a shame pit telling me, I've let people down and therefore I'm bad and they're never going to come back and all the things. And that's what all brains do. That's not that's not a problem, right? I'm just going to go, okay, all right, that's all right. I can have that emotion. And I'm going to send love to that emotion because guilt's an emotion we feel because it wants us to resolve problems. I'm going to go, okay, thank you, guilt. Thank you for showing up. I got it from here. I don't need to hear from you anymore, but I do thank you for being here, and I would like to send you well wishes for next time when you return, right? Okay, so I'm sending you love. I really hope you feel the warmth from me. And right now, if you can receive it, I just want to share with you that I have nothing but compassion for you. And I'm sending you that compassion right now. And I feel really, really honored to be able to say that to you, but I also feel very lucky to be able to say, I see what you're up to and I see how you're trying. And I see that you, like me, engage in safety behaviors because we are alive and human. And I have nothing but compassion for you in those moments. Nothing but compassion for your humanness. And maybe you could feel the same way or treat yourself the same way when you're struggling too. Okay? So I'm signing off. Sending you love. I hope you're safe. I hope you're washing your hands. I hope you are sharing time with your special people. All right? And thank you for spending your very, very precious time with me. Have a good day. Please note that this podcast or any other resources from cbtschool.com should not replace professional mental health care. If If you feel you would benefit, please reach out to a provider in your area. Have a wonderful day, and thank you for supporting cbtschool.com.